Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We're on middle of page 1433. And the discussion is around, I'll use the word interface because it's essentially the theme of all of Ayin Beis. The interface and connection between our lives and our actions and behavior below, what he calls Maisa Tachtonim, and the divine, the creator, God. At the end of the day, all of Torah, all of mitzvahs, we're coming to Shavuos, is all about this relationship. Matan Torah is called the marriage. Yom Chasanasi, the day of our betrothal, our marriage. So Atzilus is fully occupied with understanding this relationship. You want to build a relationship, you want to understand it well. And I don't just mean understand it with our minds, I mean experience it. And to experience it, we need to understand all the dynamics of how we connect to something that is so beyond us, which is godliness. And indeed, that's the problem that she's posing here in the language that we've been learning in the last few pages, is bringing all the different zohars and sources to explain that if there's going to be a relationship, God, on one hand, is completely leishanisi, is omnipresent, omnipotent, and completely not affected by anything. That's what makes God God. You're not talking about two humans having a relationship. On the other hand, for us to have a relationship, we are human, and we are impacted by each other. At the end of the day, if a person was an individual that was completely self-contained, we wouldn't have relationships. The Torah says, "Leitev Adam ha'adam liyes levade." It's not good for a man to be alone. What does that mean? Our very nature, the way we're created, is to have a companion. Or in the words of the Torah, the divine image in which we were created was created male and female, and that's why we're drawn to each other. But that's on a human level. How does that work? On the cosmic level, what are the dynamics? So that's been the main thing that he's been addressing here. That on one hand, you have to say there's a relationship, and that he calls Malchus. Malchus is the place where the divine, God himself in his infinite wisdom and design, created this place where I will meet you. Just like we speak about the Mishkan. I mean, we can't connect to God anywhere on earth. Why did God tell Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people, build for me a temple, I will dwell among you? Why can't he dwell among us wherever we are? I mean, the fact is, v'shachanti b'seichem actually means, b'seich kol echad v'echad, he's dwelling within our hearts and souls. So why do we need a structure? A physical structure. In the time of the wilderness, it was a portable structure, sanctuary. Later, it became a permanent one on the Temple Mount, Beis Hamikdash. Mashiach comes with a permanent one, a full permanent meaning also forever, nitzchi. Because the divine doesn't just want a relationship, he wants a relationship on our terms as well. And our terms requires time and space. Dira b'tachtenim. Remember, tachtenim. He doesn't just want a dira, he wants a home. He doesn't want just a home in Atzilus or in the higher spiritual worlds, or a home just in our souls, in our bodies, in our physical world. Our physical world is made up of the parameters of time and space. So we need to have in time and space a connection, a place where God meets us. And that's actually the words in the Torah. When he speaks to Moshe, he says, "V'na'adati lecha shama." That in the Holy of Holies of the temple, that's where I will meet you. Na'adati comes from the word meet. That's why moyadim, holidays, is like a meeting place in time. But yud also means from the word intimacy. Yud is also a word used for marriage and love and intimacy. That's where I will meet you. That's where we will be connected. So you see, it has to be on our terms and on the divine terms. And that's why it's a complicated process. How do you reconcile the two? So the way he's been explaining it here is that Malchus is the meeting place. That's where we meet. That's where our actions, amagia, maisa tachtenim, where does it reach? Malchus. And that's where all the action happens. Now, our actions will in turn trigger different things. It will open the doors of Malchus. And as he calls it, the tikkun of Malchus, the repair the beautification, the improvement, the the polishing of Malchus, if you wish, in turn creates and opens channels, cleans out channels and opens them up to draw down the divine from higher levels. So we're not directly impacting the higher levels. So it's God in a more pristine on his terms, but our actions create the channels that allow that to manifest in our lives, or else it remains removed or remains concealed. It would be just like saying, we're given, each of us is born with a pure soul. Neshama shenasata b'taharihi. You say that every morning. We're told that 9 months in our mother's womb was taught the entire Torah. That's all good and fine, but that's still in an innate state, even in a dormant state. The goal is now to access it and to actualize it. Be like someone who's born with a musical talent. They're a genius, but they could also, God forbid, die with that genius still inside them. The goal is to actualize it, either through training, through expressing it, called actualizing the potential that's in there. And for that, we need our actions, our Maisa Taktein, what he calls the Halos Man, Asrusa Delatata. These are all words I'm using from the pages we're reading now, that in turn reach Malchus, and that in turn triggers that when we align ourselves to godliness through Torah and Mitzvahs, Malchus in turn is aligned to the spheres above it to draw down from Chesed and Rachamim all the way up to Atik, Bina Atik, like we've been discussing. When, God forbid, our behavior clogs the arteries or blocks the channels, so Malchus then accordingly, what will draw from the Din and the Gvura, which is also rooted in divine power, but has expressed itself in this world as severities and judgments. The ultimate goal is to draw from these Chsadim and Rachamim, and they too will transform that. Even the Gvura in our lives is also divine Gvura. So it's a divine expression as well, and that's a transformation of the what he called the Din, the Midas Adin to Midas Harachamim. It's just another way of summing up. What makes it a little complicated, what makes this a little maybe difficult is because when you read the text, it's right now so much Zohars and cryptic language that it's sometimes hard to carry. That's why I wanted to give it in simple English, explain it in simple English. But at the end of the day, that's what the Zohars that he's quoting are coming to discuss. And that's what you see. When you read the Zohar on its own, it's quite fascinating. You wouldn't come to understand its significance. That's why the Alter Rebbe's language is that what is the kavanah of the Zohar? If you remember, he used before the language that he quoted from the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe. He said, so what is the Zohar coming to say? He said, the Zohar, I just want to read the exact language, that he said it a few times. That's what struck me. He said, just a second. Yeah, we're Kavonas HaMaimer. On page 1429, he says the language, the middle of the page. The Kavanah of the Maimer of the Zohar, this is language from the Alter Rebbe himself. Because when you read the Zohar itself, it's an interesting point, but you don't, what is the punchline? Why is the Zohar coming to tell us all this about the pottery, the potter's wheel and all that? So it says, Kavonas HaMaimer Shebola Farish. The Zohar is coming to answer a very important question. Evil and negative things don't come from above. Ein ra'yer momayla, like he explained. So how is it possible there should be din lamata that is negative? Like he explained, as I said, I'm reading from page 1429. And the answer the Zohar says is that the negative is coming through our actions, that in turn are blocking the flow from Atik, essentially. And that's why it manifests like din and gvura. But if our actions are appropriate, then we can access those levels where it actually comes down as a divine revelation, not as a judgment or a negative thing. That's what he says. He continues and says like this. I'm just one second. It's only Asus Latata that does it. Because above, like you said, Ani Hashem Leisha Nisi, God is beyond this. And that's why evil can't come from above, because God is kulei teiv, only goodness and only kindness. However, we are partners in this process. So even though the reservoir is pure with chesed and rachamim, but the faucet, the channels that come through Malchus is up to us whether we will access that or not. And that's what he says, Basusa Tatot comes the dinim v'gvuris, and then he continues on top of 1430 and he says, and this is what the Zohar is coming to say, up to what point? How high does our efforts reach? I'm reading the top of 1430 now. Atzilus Mokan Evraim, not higher. But on the other hand, we know that we're accessing higher energy. So how do you explain that? So that's where he goes on to explain the Hina Yadua, the Inyanhu, rather, the Hina Yadua on page 1430 till where we're up to now. The whole process, Atzilus is the interface, but that alone is too intense, so you need to have Malchus, the Parsa, and then Matat, what he called the Nal, the angel that in turn channels it. And that's where our Veda reaches. And that's where the channels open and close, accordingly, drawing down the different types of levels of divine energy, whether it will be Chesed and Rachamim, or it will be Gvura, which ultimately can lead to very negative things, as he explained. So this is the rest of everything we've been learning is all Zohars, essentially Zohars, because he brought at least 3-4 Zohars, if I can count correctly, probably even more. With a Kol Shefer, that was one that he brought before, and then the one we're learning now, Idra Rabbah. Yeah, where he's discussing this idea of Atik and the channels that we open up, and that's what we've been learning, and that's what we learned yesterday. And so just to sum up what we learned, exactly what we learned, is that when we sublimate ourselves, the tachten is botl ela elyon nasa kemidas v'anogas elyon. That through our sublimating, through our bittul and nullifying ourselves, we align ourselves with that which is above. In the parentheses, he said in the Zohar, it's bederach ma'ivir, the madrega tachtenim, which means it's only passing through; it doesn't fully be absorbed by us be'efim for islapshus, in a manner of islapshus. But kafi amavur be'idar rabbi, he says yesh leimer that atik nasa gam that also gam klei hagvura becomes chesed rachim, becomes a keli. The keli also, it's not just passing through. And he explained because the sheresh adin is through the tzimtzum. Yeah. So we have a gileir of the source of the gvura, which is the koyach hagvul. But when it's einem izgala, that's when gvura affects, which is the negative force of gvura. And the Siba Sadover who mishum the b'chinas raiva the raiva mizgala kisheyesh kisei v'keli lekabel erve gilizeh. When does raiva the raiva, this level from Atik, this higher level, is revealed when there's a kisei v'keli. If there's no throne for the king, there's no container, so he can't manifest there. So he says, what does that mean? Kasher Malchus b'chinas keli la'gili. When Malchus is a keli to the gili, oz meir umizgala. Then it radiates and gets revealed. And then he said, this is like pischuli kechudah shal machat, like opening up the eye of a needle. That's our work. Which, what is chudah shal machat? He said, is the level of Malchus. And we're using a needle like the eye of a needle. We're like repairing and we're weaving, if you wish. We're weaving the embroidery of Malchus. The Malchus is ready to receive the Eiram L'mayla, a Keli, for Ozai Memela, and then once you have that Keli, then automatically it will draw down from above, and that's Ani Eftach L'cha, that in turn, as you will open for me the eye of the needle from Malchus through your work, I will open for you and draw down into you the wide corridor of the ulam. So even though because it's ani eftach, it says God has to open it. Like we spoke about the 50th day, after 49 days of the Omer that we count, the 50th God counts. God gives us. Matantai, He gives it to us. So even though Esus Latata doesn't reach there directly, as we said, Im kol zeh b'hot talya. I saw this is an actual language from the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer. Nevertheless, it's dependent on us. Because through us opening the eye of the needle from below, in turn, that causes God to open up the wide corridor of the ulam. The kasher ampa the Malchus nehirin, when the face of Malchus is radiating, the kisei muchenes the kabel sa'ir. I'm sorry, the mechenes the kabel. The kabel sa'ir nimshar b'mamele b'chenes ere elia. Because when Malchus is radiating, shining, and becomes a kisei, a throne, a keli, that's receptive to receive the air, then the air is memela nimshach ere elyon. And that's kamayim aponim alponim. I'm reviewing what we learned yesterday. Kain leva adam. What does ponim alponim mean? That our face. So ponim alponim is b'chinis yoyer Hashem ponav elecha. That the face of God, of Atik, Ponim Datika, radiates in Ponim of Zun, of Zon Malchus. And how does that happen? How does that higher face radiate in the face of Zon Malchus? That's because of Leva Adam. Because when we have the Leva Adam, it's not talking about the face above. It's talking about our work from our heart. It says, Nimshach Rasusla, the Leva Adam atach la'adam b'chinas Malchus. When we do our work, the heart of the human being reaches to the heart of Malchus, which is like the likeness of man. That in turn draws down the ponim of Atik into the ponim of Zohan Malchus. Did we read this line or did I stop here? Let me just look.
We did read it.
Yeah. A few more lines. He says, what does he say? He says like Vahainu. I'm reading the last few lines, which means even though ponim al-ponim is higher than our actual efforts, because we're talking about ponim of Atik to the ponim of Zah and Malchus. Nevertheless, that comes from us. The chen leva adam la adam, because that's how the heart of the person to the person, one heart to another, the kasher nisakin, the takin binyan amalchus be'efin aroi, is when you repair or prepare, prime, may be the right word. It's not just repairing; it's priming in be'efin aroi in an appropriate manner. Malchus azay memela nimshach ba'ed elyam amayla b'bchinis yoyed Hashem panov. So memela then you draw down the yoyed Hashem panov elecha from above. So they has to explain that there's two ways you can explain the verse. It says Kamayim aponim leponim, like the light, like a face is reflected in water, so too is a heart reflected in another. You could also explain that the faces are going on a higher level, and Leva Adam L'Adam is going on a lower level. That's what we discussed earlier in volume 2. Here it looks like he's going with that approach. Yeah, because Kamayim upon the ponim, like the Mayim aponim from Atik into Zoh, Kain Leva Adam La Adam, meaning the Aveda of our Leva Adam that reaches into the level of Malchus. So it's basically our Aveda with Malchus, that's crossed the ponim el ponim. Okay. So that's what we've reached so far. That's where we
question.
Yeah, sure.
So, first of all, that was a wonderful summary, very helpful. So, thank you. I actually had a question even before you did the summary, but so it's perfect. That the question falls on the question of the sakin, which you translated a couple different ways to sort of and a polish. You used to first, then you said to repair, to prime. So it's understood well enough. My question is, why does it need that priming or that correcting? Is it because of our chataim, our sins, and we're not always channeling goodness, or is it because of the tzimtzum, or is it because of both?
Both.
Uh-huh.
Well, it just goes down to how God created the world. Bereshis bar Elokim, he created a perfect world, a beautiful world, but he created with that tzimtzum that would allow ultimately for the shattering of the containers, ultimately for the diminishment of the moon, which is Malchus, and with a purpose that we should do the job of repairing, if you wish, or polishing, as you quoted me, and beautifying. When we do that, we realign it all, and that's our work. So yes, it's rooted in the tzimtzum, that's God's process. But then when Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, which we say is rooted in the diminishment of the moon, which is rooted in the shattering of the container, Shviras HaKelim, which is rooted in the tzimtzum, then it's just intensified. Like I've explained, that when God conceals himself, the purpose is for us to tikkun of that concealment, if you wish. In other words, to see through the concealment and realize it's only there to bring out our deeper strengths. But if we misunderstand it, then the tzimtzum becomes far more problematic, because then it becomes an end in itself and leads to all the problems that the chet tzadas and the following sins. So it's all part of, God created a world where we could potentially transgress. We don't have to, but we could. And then actual transgression, so to speak, intensifies the tzimtzum. And then the work is a harder work, because now we have to reverse this whole process. And all the avodah we do is exactly that. That's called why we call it tikkun, the world of tikkun, to repair, to polish, to improve everything that we do. Sometimes it's correcting our ways, tikkun as in literally correcting something that we injured, or tikkun could also be like it says tikkunin. The spheres are called tikkunin. They're like sometimes compared to ornaments, like beautifying through jewelry and so on. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's continue reading. Middle of page, a little down, a little more than halfway. The line begins. The line begins. Nimshach ba'oir elyon malmayla b'chinas yoyr Hashem panav. Okay. So again, repeating again, a lot of this is the language from Biyuri Azer, which is the mimer of the Alter Rebbe in Tov Kuf, what did I say, Samachei, I believe. Yeah. Mimer of the Alter Rebbe, Tov Kuf Samachei. Right, Vayero. So now he continues. Ubabira Idr Rabba Shom. And the explanation of the Idr Rabba, which I'm almost sure he means this Arizal, the commentaries that explain the Idr Rabba. Now, Idr Rabba was the one that is the bottom of last page. The one that starts Tana Loidayim L'Rishoyim, the Mahapcha Midas Arachim Midas Adin, L'Midas Arachim L'Midas Adin. So he says like this now. In the Bir Vidr Rabba Sham Kosav, he writes, Al Pi Masha Kosav Bezer Achrei, Daf Samachei Amid Beis. So he's now bringing another explanation of a Zohar. Below, the publisher writes that perhaps it should say Samachei Amid Aleph. No, it's not 65b, but 65a, being that maybe that was a Plitas. Okay, so what does he say in the beer of the Idr Rabbah that's going to help us understand what we're learning here? He says, the Beshaita, the Mahapcha, that when you transform, and he's talking there transforming compassion to din. What does that mean? So we learned, because if the Rishayim, wicked people, when they transgress, and he actually is talking there about Zdoim. And what does the Zohar essentially say? That our actions control whether the channel will open that will allow Atik, the Rachamim and compassion of Atik to shine into existence. Rishayim do the opposite. They close that door, so to speak, and don't allow that Atik. Atik is lo yizgal. So what happens then? So look at the top of the page. He said that's when kol dinin de Zohar Ampin's minin. Then the judgments of Zohar Ampin, which are not being illuminated by the kavana el between the higher intention of God's purpose in the gvura, so now dinim are reigning. That's why it's a time of judgment, and it could be severe judgments, like we learned earlier. So he said that's due to our actions, negative actions. So he says now like this. So in the beard he goes on to say, the b'shaita de mahapche ksiv havaya b'nikud elikim. So let me tell you more what it says in the Zohar there. The Zohar asks a question that when you're talking about the wicked people of Zdoim, so there's one pasuk that uses the name Elikim, which makes sense because Elikim is din, judgment. So God is judging these wicked people of Zdoim. But then there's another pasuk that uses the word name Havaya, which is Rachamim. So Zohar asks, which one is it? We know when it comes to Zdoim, it's the midah of judgment is reigning. So that's where he explains, is because the Rachamim of Havaya is being concealed by them. And the goal is to, obviously, to reveal it. So he's saying, now, in the beer of the Idr Rabbi explains that when the door is closed, so to speak, where the Rachamim of Havaya is not shining in a revealed way, that's Havaya b'nikud elikim. Let's explain what that means. Sometimes Havaya, we know when you write it, can be written several ways. Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's like, in many of our Sidurim, it's just Yud Yud. They don't write out Yud Kei Vav Kei. In Chumash, in a Sefer Torah, you'll see Yud Kei Vav Kei. Sometimes, however, you see the word Adnai. I don't want to say the way we pronounce it, and that is also Havaya, but that's called Benikud Adnai. But sometimes the name Havaya is dressed up in the Nikud. Nikud is the punctuation of Elikim. So when you read it, you actually read Havaya, even though written is written Elikim. This is part of all discussions of like when we say Kishem Shani Nichtav Kachani Nikra, that today we don't pronounce Havaya in its original form, we pronounce it through Adnai. So there's the pronunciation and there's the written word. It's not when Mashiach comes, Hoye B'yem Hahu, Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad, Kishem Shani Nichtav Kachani Nikra. I'll be called by the way I'm written. So Chassidus explains, we actually learned it earlier. You may recall, we spoke about Amin Yesh Me'Rabba B'chol Koichei. Spoke about this, I think it was on page, on the left side here, yeah. Page 1417. So he said, that Shmoi will be pronounced the same way it's written. So the same idea is Havaya and Elikim. You could have it written Elikim, so it's channeled through Elikim, but it's really Havaya. So he says like this: Havaya b'nikul Elikim Hare Atzmus Daled Esis Havaya Lo Nishtanu. The very core of the four letters of Havaya did not change. They were not affected by the wicked acts of Sodom. Ima Nekudis. What changed in the pronunciation of the word? So you see here, again, the two sides. Something that doesn't change, Leisha Nisi, because Havaya is beyond. Atik does not change because actions below are, God forbid, wicked. Atik, the door closes, so Atik doesn't shine through. But the Melech, just to use an example, the king remains intact in his palace. The only thing is we have no access to him because our actions have essentially clogged the arteries, have clogged the pipelines, the channels. But Atik itself remains intact. So the letters themselves don't change. It's still Havaya, but the Nekudis, Asherhem Binyan HaKelim, the Nekudis, which is the structure of the Kelim, they have been compromised. Remember we said Binyan Malchus, the building of it. You have to have a structure, you have to have a throne, you have to have a Keli. Ad kan l'shene. So actually this looks the actual language of the Bira Idr Rabbi. Bira Idr Rabbi, I believe, comes in the Zohar Harakia. I have to look it up, but I think there's a commentaries from the Talmidei Arizal, they call it Bira Idr Rabbi. Okay, so that's what he says there, which of course is consistent and only helps support what we've been learning till now. Now, just bear in mind, I know my introduction today, I explained all this in simpler English. You could wonder, why didn't Rebbe Rashab just say it all simply? Remember, this is heavy Chassidus based on heavy Kabbalah, and everything is very grounded. So all this is built on the Zoyars. Our job is to add the Nakudis, so to speak, and try to explain it in ways that are more palpable and palatable to people on our level. But the Rebbe Rashab is saying it the way it is, based on the original sources. And especially, he's actually quoting, it's almost word for word, from the Biur Azer of the Tzemach Tzedek, which frankly has helped me explain this as well, because I looked there to see any details that are added there that are not here. There are things there that are more, explains more details than the Rebbe Rashab says here. But the Rebbe Rashab cites what's necessary to explain what he's saying here. Okay. So that's this additional piece from the Biur of the Idr Rabba. V'hainu. Now going back to the theme that we're learning, Shashinui, go back to the Shinui. Where's the change? The Spilus. Where's change happen? Hurak ba Kalim. The change is in the Kalim, not in the Oedus, not in the Havai itself. Any questions just on what we just learned now, if anybody? I'm going slower because of the density here. And now he's going to bring us back to the Torah Eir that we already referred to earlier. Remember, the Torah Eir on Parsha Vayera talks about Er Dana, where Hashem comes down to view, to experience, and to witness the crimes of Sdom. We explain what means comes down. God is everywhere. That means he manifests on that level. So if you remember, he brought the Torah Eir earlier, few times actually, I believe. So I'm referring to the bottom of page 1429. Called the Torah is sometimes called Pasach Eliyahu, sometimes Erdana. But both names are fitting to that mimer. So if you look there, we mentioned it earlier. So he's going to now bring back that Torah. He says, "V'hu k'moshe kasa b'Torah v'Parsha Vayera." This is what he says in Torah on this Parsha Vayera, the Parsha of all these, of many of, not all, some of these Zoyars are all around the story of Sdom, the wicked people of Sdom, their wickedness. So what does he say in Torah? The halos man, the elevation of Mayin Nukfin, the feminine waters from below, which refers to our effort from below, Magia b'bchinas hakelim. Before the Zohar was saying Magia to Malchus, but Malchus, as we're learning and we're going to learn, is the level of Kelim. So the Susla Tata directly reaches to Kelim. Ukashara Kelim usukonim umuchonim lekabla sa'ir. And when the Kelim are primed and polished and prepared properly, and are ready umuchonim and are prepared lekabla sa'ir to receive the oir. So in other words, you made the keli just like you polish a cup, or you polish or you clean up the pipes. So then what happens? The pipes are blocked; it can't flow through, or if they're in some way clogged. When they're cleaned up, when they're prepared, then the mamela shines through them. And now he brings us back to the original Zohar of the potter's wheel. V'zeu kedain tikla distachlis kamei. That's kedain, that's like tikla, the wheel. Remember the wheel that he began on page 1429. The tikla, the turning wheel, distachlis kamei, that turns before him. The lefi eifen tikun Malchus. According to the manner that we repair, build, polish, prime Malchus, Kain Hu Hamshacham Amayla. So directly, accordingly, comes the Amshacha from above. So he's now tying connected what we learned when we started on page 1429, the Tikla. The Yeshleimer, another Yeshleimer, the Rebbe Asab says, and we can say, the B'chinas Chesed v'Gvura de Zah, that Chesed and Gvura of Zah, Im Tikkun HaMalchus Kedeboy L'Mahava, if Malchus is properly, Kedeboy L'Mahava means properly, very solidly or very, very well primed, Nimshah Ba M'B'chinas HaChesed. So then the Malchus will be drawn into it, the level of Chesed. The Im Chaz V'Shalom, and if God forbid, Lehepech, in other words, the Tikkun of Malchus is not properly done. Nimshach Ba M'B'chinas HaGvura. Why is this a Yesh Shleimer? I'm not sure. This seems to be the obvious meaning of everything we've been learning. But he's saying it specifically. So the Chesed and Gvura of Atzilus are intact. They're there. The question is, what's going to flow into Malchus? So if Malchus is primed properly, Chesed will flow. If not, it will be Gvura. Maybe the Rebbe Rashab is spelling it out because it maybe doesn't say it explicitly in the Zohar, even though it was pretty implicit. But okay, fine. He's spelling out for Yesh Leiman. I have to go back to read earlier to see why it's not. Why it was not so explicit. V'zeu shekosa b'zeir the tetzaveh. Now he's going back to the Zohar of Tetzaveh. Let me tell you where that is. Go back to page 1432, the previous page, around line 6, 9, or 10, 1 second, 3, 6. Yeah, line 9. You see, that long desire that says that when we smile from below, we get a smile from above. And when we show a sour face from below, a bitter face, that's what flows. And that's why the Migdash Melech said why it's so terrible to atzvus, depression or sadness. But I'd say depression is the right word. So he's quoting, he's going back to that Zohar now, Tetzaveh. See, Tetzaveh, Daf Kuf Pei Dal Ayin Beis. Says, and that's what the Zohar and Tetzaveh meant. It wrote, and if the person is in a state of atziva, atzvos, which is like depression or sourness, a negative attitude, yavin leidina, they give him din, judgment. In other words, it's directly based on our actions. Okay, so now he's tied together the Zohar Tetzaveh, the Zohar of the potter's wheel in Vayera, right? That was the Zohar Vayera. The Torah is Vayera. This also Zohar is Vayera. Okay. The Idr Rabbah is also on the Pasuk in Vayera, just to point out. Okay. So then the next piece, let's see. This is all in Atzilus. Okay, I see the Yesh Leimer is not just about Chesed and Gvura. The Yesh Leimer looks like it's about the whole picture here. And higher than Atzilus, in the infinite divine light, higher than Atzilus, who the Kasher Malchus hi muchenes lekabla eir. There's no Shina directly. Remember, Havaya doesn't change there. That stays intact. The question is whether it's flowing to us or not. So that's what he says now. When Malchus is muchenes lekabla eir, Malchus is in a state that's primed and ready to receive the eir, which means it's in a state where nehira de ampin that its face is glowing. So then nimshacha er maila maila mepkinas atika. So then the air from higher, from the highest levels, comes from atik, is transmitted. But os kol hamadregas in pkinas rachamim kanal. And then due to that flow, all the levels are now saturated and filled with rachamim, with compassion. And if, God forbid, it's the opposite, which means Malchus is not ready, and our work is not primed it properly, the air does not transmit from above, and the flow is a very diminished flow. Exactly like with the example I've been giving, the arteries that are clogged don't let the blood flow properly. The arteries that are open allow it to flow full intensity. And when the keli is not prepared, he's adding something more. Not only is it not letting the flow, but also the oir, let's call it like the blood, when there's a clogged artery, not just it doesn't let it flow, even that which would flowed is also mistalik, is removed. It causes it to recede. That was kvar nimshach. Even the air that was transmitted already. Ukamaimer, the kad an tistalik. Yeah, that when they said, like he says, tistalik, like kinishmasa b'lei gufa, kigufa b'lei nishmasa. I'm sorry. That when our work or the transgressions have blocked the flow, the channels, so kad an tistalik. Ukamai begalusa kuchabricha solik. Like we say in Golus, the Eibishter Solik, he was removed. We're not talking about removed fundamentally. We're talking about in a revealed way. You don't see the flow of the divine. But when the keli is primed and prepared, it's primed and prepared through the actions, but from below, then the air is transmitted. It comes from Atik, He's adding not just you're getting the same flow, just like the transgressions do two things. They don't let the flow come in. And even the flow that did come on, they diminish. When you do the right thing, you allow the flow, but also taste was said. From Atik comes additional energy, not just that which was there before the transgressions, but even additional new energy, like we learned earlier, Chadash, new unprecedented energies flow, which we see also when a person becomes healthy. Besides the fact that the regular flow continues, they can also have a surge of new energy due to their healing, their bypass surgery, if you wish. Okay, and with that we conclude the paragraph and the page 1433. I will stop here. And if anybody wants to ask anything, please do so. Okay, good.
I have a question. No one else.
Coming together.
No one else does.
Coming together. Go ahead.
So it's actually a follow-up on the discussion of tikkun, for what he said just now. I totally understand the explanation that it's been given, but just asking more philosophically, why did the Eibishter create a world that is essentially already ill? I won't say terminally ill, chas v'shalom, but there's already a tzimtzum, there's already a blockage, if you will. There's already a hester. There's not a complete flow, and so only by our avoda does the flow start to come into place. Now the Eibishter can do anything, kol yachol. So why couldn't he create a world where essentially we're naturally channeling godliness? We are naturally inclined to do good. We can choose to do evil. It's not to say that you take away free choice. Not to say that you don't do avoida, but it seems like he created a world in which we're essentially swimming upstream. The deck is stacked against us, and that seems a little, I don't know. It seems cruel.
I don't see it that way at all. The tzimtzum is not stacking any deck. The tzimtzum is necessary to create an independent existence, independent consciousness. If there was no tzimtzum, you wouldn't have tachtainim. Now, if you're asking the question why God needs it all together, so that we know is the answer to that is Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu. God desired to have a dira b'tachtainim. He wanted to have a home in this lowest of worlds. The Alter Rebbe explains that you can't ask why, because taiva is higher than questions. This is just God's desire, and it's beyond the intelligent questions and answers itself was created. I don't think that's what you're asking, but that's where it's all rooted. The God desire to have a dira b'tachtenim. In order, once you know that he wants a tachtenim, how do you create tachtenim that makes sense? The only way is use a symptom. It's like the teacher conceals his intelligence so the student can be an independent entity. If there was no symptom, like the Rizal says, the Eir Ein Sof was so intense, there'd be no room for existence. So existence is not possible without a symptom. Once you have a symptom, once you have a symptom, it can go two ways. Either the symptom is understood for what it is, the student understands that symptom is for his benefit, to be able to appreciate the teacher, and now he starts studying step by step, and he connects to the Eir that lies within the symptom and beyond the symptom. Or if it's misunderstood, which is the free will that we exercise. So you could say the whole existence is actually ultimate chesed. It's God's love that he created a world which is independent. They have the ability to choose either way. It's an agnostic universe, because then there's no choice without that. And now we can go either direction. Now, obviously, human beings did sin and transgress, but at the same time, we also have the power to correct that and to not transgress. And ultimately, we will bring Mashiach and Geula, and then the purpose will be fulfilled.
Yes, I understand all that. And maybe the question I'm asking is
that's why God created the Yetzer Hara? You're asking why he set us up with the Yetzer Hara?
No, not at all. And I'm about to say the question I'm asking may be internally inconsistent, but one could imagine a world in which there is a tzimtzum, but which is not.
That means without a Yetzer Hara. That's what you want to have.
Where the Yetzer Tov dominates more, where it's not. I don't know.
It's where the whole time. The whole time. Then there's no purpose.
Uh-huh.
You have to have a battle. There has to be a concealment for us to be able to achieve anything significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just seems like I hear you. It just
I see it as an act of love, not as an act of setting up of upstream at all. Is it? Yes. You've learned Tanya, I'm sure, right? The whole Tanya tells us that the challenge and the battle is the purpose. That's what God wants. He wants a battle, which means he wants to make it difficult. Yes, it is difficult.
I understand. And maybe this is just me, and maybe I'm not a good person, but it just seems like the Yetzer Hara is stronger than the Yetzer Tov. I mean, it just seems that way. We're more inclined, everyone sins. We're inclined to sin. We're inclined to do good as well. But it seems like the Yetzer Hara has the upper hand.
But you understand that this has nothing to do with Ayin Beis. Your question is, even if you never learned Ayin Beis, right?
Not necessarily, because we're talking about tikkun of Malchus.
Hold on one second. Your question, I could see anyone asking, even if they never opened an Ayin Beis. The Yetzer Hara seems stronger than the Yetzer Tov. You just said it.
Yeah, true, but it seems like that's the reason why Malchus needs tikkun. Essentially, even though it's macroscopic on an individual level, it's the same issue. Malchus is anyway. There's no
purpose. Bottom line, there's no purpose to existence if everything is perfect, and then we don't need us. If Malchus did not need tikkun, then why do we need the human race, and why do we need existence altogether? And that will happen. There's no answer to that question. It has to. We have to be able to repair something. We have to be able to achieve something, or else life has no purpose.
Mm-hmm.
This has nothing to do with Ayin Beis. This is the whole basis of the whole creation of existence.
Why God I understand that.
Human beings with free will, and why he gave us a Yetzer Hara. For it to be anything significant, if God does it on his terms, then it's just not, if he wants it to be real, if you want your child to really grow up and be independent, they have to be independent, and they have to be able to make mistakes and then be wise enough to correct the mistakes or not to make them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in the same boat. I don't think it's about you. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I hear you, and I understand.
The whole Tanya comes to teach us that we have plenty of tools and resources to fight the Yetzer Hara and to win over it. Yeah. But that takes work. Nothing is automatic. Everything is going to be hard work.
I hear you. I'm just somehow caught up with this idea of tikkun and malchus. Like the Eibishter created a perfect world. I guess it's a perfect world for us.
He did not create a perfect. He created a world that needs tikkun. That needs to be improved. That's exactly why
that's the point.
He created Adam and Chava.
That's the point. Okay. So he essentially created a world where there's a challenge. That's dafka the point.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And any other questions?
I do think the issues you just discussed are directly related to the Inyan of Tikkun and Malchus. I don't think it's outside of anything.
The question why the HR is stronger than the HR Tov is not about, I don't see, based on what we're learning in Ayin Beis. That's a question you could ask even if you don't learn Chassidus.
Sure. Okay, you answered well. In any case, you answered very well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Rabbi, does the Rebbe Rashab explain, or is going to explain, or perhaps he already has explained, how is it that Malchus of Atzilus comes to be informed by our actions here below in this world? Is it through the Malachim somehow carry up and signal Malchus of Atzilus, or how does that work?
He already explained and will explain that the Malachim play a very important role here because they are the processors. They are the processors both from the top down and from the bottom up.
Bottom up, okay.
Like remember, we learned that the Malachim carry and they process this energy. Yeah, so he will talk about it. But does that answer your question? When you know that the Malachim do it, then you know the process.
Well, I'm sure there's many details, but I'm happy with that answer at this point. Thank you very much.
Well, the whole discussion actually began to explain the Malachim and how the compassion that reaches us comes through Me'ai, through our gut, through the Malachim. If you go back to page 1427, you'll see the whole thing began with that. Everything we're discussing here is explaining those Malachim, what those Malachim do for us, the neshamas.
Right. When the rabbi was teaching us about the digestive process, it seemed to be a mila lamata, top down, whereas now we're talking about mata lamila, right? How is it that
good point, but he said also mata lamila before. We'll soon learn about it more.
Oh, okay.
It's both directions.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Remember when he spoke about Matat takes our prayers and weaves them into crowns?
Yes. But Matat is already up in Atzilus, the rabbi taught us.
Matat is actually in Bria, but Malchus of Atzilus, yeah.
Right, but our actions are here in this lowest of worlds, but somehow
and those actions are then processed through by the angels. They help carry it all the way up to Malchus.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. If you go back to page 1427, you'll see that's where he discusses that there. Truth is, it begins actually in 1425. But 1425 to 27, but he's going to come back to it. He's going to explain it all. Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question. This is the way it ordinarily would work, right? But I have to keep going back to how you bypass the system. Is that the workaround? Is that, the Yehei Shmei Rabbah? Is that a workaround for all this? Like, can you bypass? Is that like a tikkun or something? I don't know.
I don't think it's a bypass situation here. There is a concept of tshuva where you can, when a person has transgressed, they can reach deeper and reach higher levels through tshuva. But remember, Ayin Beis Rabbah is a response to kedusha. You're saying someone's saying Kaddish, and then you're responding Om Yeshmei Rabbah. So it's also part of the process. It's part of the process of prayer, which does have the element that it reaches deeper into the source to draw down. So we're going to get back to this. Right now, he's talking about the even Amen Yeshmei Rabbah has to begin first. You have to say Amen Yeshmei Rabbah. Then there's Bechol Koichai to say it with all intensity. So there's a what to call it, a routine, a daily routine of how we connect. That's what he's talking about here. That whole process of how our actions affect. Then there are, when we say Amen Yeshmei Rabbah with a lot of intent, with a lot of intensity and intention, or other things that we do that can reach deeper, higher levels. But it goes hand in hand.
Right. So it's
not
like a
either
booster.
or. It's not
Right,
either
right.
or is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, it's like a surge of energy, maybe a booster
Well,
to whatever
If you
you're
want the whole
doing in
picture,
any of it.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What he's talking about here is the actual dynamics of what happens below affects above. Obviously, the more we do below, the more it draws down from above. And yes, you can leap sometimes to the highest levels and draw from there. But even then, if you haven't unclogged the arteries, even if you could jumpstart the heart, you still want to unclog the arteries, right? See what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I wasn't saying it instead of what we have to do as our regular avoda, but just
well, in a way like Yom Kippur, once a year, we are able to go all the way into the deepest levels of the engine room. But then comes the day after Yom Kippur and the rest of the year. You want to live by it in a way that works. Like I said, you can jumpstart the heart even if the arteries are blocked, but you need the arteries. You need a functional, healthy person. And we want it to be integrated. So this is what we're learning now is the integration part. We'll get back to when neshamas have the ability to go higher than angels. Remember, there's two parts. There's neshamas as they come down below. Remember? Like the vision of the eye in the container. And then there's the neshamas as they are able to access even higher than Torah and higher than the angels. But you need both. So if you want the real so-called segue, you have to go back to like page 1425, where he says that even though Israel, the Jewish people, the souls, are Ishen Ene, they're the pupil of God's eye, that are higher than angels, that are only the eyes of God, nevertheless, there's a ma'ila, malachim, that neshamas receive from them, that they digest and process the flow, which is what we're in the middle of now. And then we're going to go back to neshamas being higher than angels. That's essentially if you go to the next page, 1434, we're about to come one more paragraph, and then we're going back to the neshamas being higher than angels.
Great. Thank you very much.
So it's a constant back and forth. Yeah.